Hello, John David. I thought I would present a letter response to you through a video. I'll be this thing isn't quite finished. I need to add in the scriptures and stuff like that, but I'll cut and paste it and add it to this YouTube video, and you can cut and paste it, and then you can add your own little dialogue to it for the responses, and maybe you'll make your own video here. I thought I'd do it this way so you could hear my voice and see my actions and stuff, and see that how I am. You know, it's more personal this way, I feel. And who knows? You just might get more. Might get an audience that might be interesting. Okay, dear John David, this is how it goes. I think it's going to be too confusing here if I try to break this up into a dialogue, so I think I'll respond with a monologue to the latest exchange. If I end up leaving anything out you wanted me to touch upon, feel free to remind me so I can respond further. Anyway, you seem to be distancing yourself from the Joseph Smith translation of John 1:1, going from the notion of dealing with the gospel being preached in the beginning and Jesus being a God, to Jesus being a God with being big G God with big G God, possibly seeing it as a Mormon view of big G gods, but still a powerful human with a powerful human existing side by side. You brought it up that if it were as the King James has it, that it would mean that God is changeable. That in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God means God is changeable. Maybe you could elaborate more here. I noticed, though, that you steered away from the other scriptures that seem to meld the two entities further, such as the fact that Jesus is the creator of all things, visible and invisible, and is before all things, like God is before all things. Or are you going to say that Jesus and God, Father and Son, came into existence at the exact same time? Or is this where the Bible has been corrupted? If I was going to be a Mormon, I think I'd have to believe the latter here. By the way, has Joseph Smith removed from his translation those scriptures from the Bible that has Jesus before all things and the creator of all things visible and invisible? Has Smith removed, quote, by him, Jesus, do all things consist? If not, why did he, Smith, leave it alone? Also, in what you sent me, you presented the Mormon notion that the scrolls are actually in the AD era, not, say, 200 BC, like I was led to believe. Remember, John David, the excitement of the scrolls was over the fact that they predated Christianity by at most 200 years, and atheists were hopeful that writings in them, not just Old Testament, would show that Christianity wasn't original, but inspired by the writings of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Also, if you've read your brother's book, Biblical Mormonism, and I have, like my dad has, your brother, Richard, talked about how very little has changed in the Bible, as the Dead Sea Scrolls pointed out. Do you believe what Richard wrote? Or do you believe what you sent me today? By the way, you really seem to want me to drop the Book of Abraham issue of Smith numbering, of numbering and labeling old pagan funeral Egyptian documents, and I think you made it clear to me of what you believe about it. But it's hard for me to drop it because you haven't made it clear to me, John David. I mean, I don't know if you view it like some Mormons do. A conduit of God inspired Smith to write up a story about Abraham being tied up to be sacrificed by a bald Egyptian priest with a knife, or that he was wrong in his numbering and labeling of the surviving papyrus, but right on about tons of scrolls that were burned up in a fire that can't be verified, that disappeared like the golden plates and just can only be seen by the eyes of faith. I think you are going for the latter here. You do remember the time you sent me another picture that showed the exact same type of scene, like from the Book of Breathings, that became the Book of Abraham. That it was not a bald guy, but Anubis, preparing a body for burial. You remember that, right? To me, that pretty much nailed it, that the drawn-on bald guy's head should have been Anubis. It should have been Anubis also, especially when this papyrus was with 2 Egyptian mummies that Smith purchased with the scrolls. I mean, on John David, why should the Book of Abraham be in a tomb with 2 pagans who were prepared for something not kosher? Anyway, John David, I'll try to steer away from the fact that Smith numbered and labeled something that had nothing to do with Abraham and plenty to do with Egyptian mummies. But it will be hard, since it seems so damning of Smith's credibility. I mean, you won't believe the doubt it creates in me when it comes to Mormonism. It's like in Islam, where the sun has to ask permission of Allah to rise again. Or in atheism, where something complex like life can spring out of chaos instead of experiencing disintegration on an ancient seafloor. Well, John David, let me know if I missed anything. You said that I didn't respond to something you sent me. I remember you sent me something, but it was very long and I had a hard time following it. Is there anything you could give me? Is there any way you could give it to me in summary form? In this latest, you sent me a site to try to take me to thoughts of the Joseph Smith translation, but it was pretty long also. I did read the summary, and I'll try to read it again, but all it seemed to be saying over and over again is that the Bible is not enough, that it's been corrupted in spite of evidence presented by the Dead Sea Scrolls, and that this time God has it right. Quote, in the beginning was the gospel preached, unquote. Not, quote, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was God, unquote. Well, if you want to believe that, but if you believe that, then, John David, I'd go for the condo to God theory, in spite of the, quote, written in his own hand, when concerning the Book of Abraham. Oh, one more thing. You asked again how the Bible is contradicted by the Book of Mormon. When I presented my reasons last time, you presented scriptures that you felt would get me to believe that there are many gods, contradicting, quote, no other God shall be before me or after me, and, quote, besides me there is no other God, unquote. But, John David, to me, those scriptures you presented had nothing to do with gods, but becoming sons of God when becoming born again. Personally, John David, I really don't know how becoming born again and sitting in thrones with Jesus will make us God or even gods. We become sons of God through adoption, through being born again, but to make us create all things and to be before all things like Jesus, man, that seems to be stretching it. Sincerely, your cousin. Bye.